What would you do if your entire world was torn apart in a single moment? Sarah stood by the rain-soaked window of her modest apartment, staring out at the blurred city lights. Life had been unkind to her, but she had learned to endure. A single mother to an inquisitive 6-year-old boy, she juggled between part-time jobs and late-night shifts just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Years ago, Sarah's life was full of promise and love. She was married to her high school sweetheart, Ethan, a man who could light up a room with his smile. But then the war came, sweeping Ethan away to a foreign battlefield, leaving her with nothing but a folded flag and a lifetime of unanswered questions. Every night, Sarah found herself wondering what might have been. Was Ethan truly gone? She had never seen his body, just the words of a sorrowful letter from the military. Presumed dead. Life trudged on, but her heart never fully accepted the void. And then, on a cold and rainy evening, as the clock struck 10, a knock came at her door. A knock that would change everything. With trembling hands, Sarah approached the door, her heart racing inexplicably. She opened it slowly, and there he was, a stranger, soaked to the bone, his face unfamiliar yet somehow deeply recognizable. He looked at her with eyes that carried a storm of emotion and whispered, "Sarah, it's me." Who was this man? Could it truly be Ethan, back from the dead? Or was this the beginning of another heartbreak? The worn-down apartment in the heart of the city was far from the life Sarah once dreamed of, but it was home, for now. The peeling wallpaper and the faint hum of a leaky faucet in the kitchen were constant reminders of the struggles she faced. Yet, in the corner of the living room, amidst a pile of second-hand toys, her son Ben's laughter echoed like a melody of hope. Sarah's days began before the sun rose. Each morning she brewed a pot of weak coffee, savoring the bitter warmth as a moment of peace before the chaos of her routine. The clinking of cereal bowls followed, as Ben chatted endlessly about the latest superhero he admired. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah always smiled, drawing strength from his innocent joy. After dropping Ben off at school, she headed to her first job at the local diner. Her hands were rough from hours of scrubbing dishes, and her back ached from the constant bending. But the paycheck, meager as it was, kept the landlord at bay and the electricity running, most of the time. Sarah's evenings were no easier. As Ben finished his homework at the small kitchen table, she worked late shifts as a cashier at a nearby convenience store. Sometimes, when the clock struck midnight and she finally climbed into bed, her stomach growled from the meals she skipped to ensure Ben had enough to eat. Though life was hard, Sarah found solace in the small moments. The way Ben hugged her tightly after school, the occasional kind word from a regular customer at the diner, or the rare evenings when she could read her favorite worn-out novel by the soft light of a bedside lamp. Her neighbors played a minor but notable role in her life. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman with a penchant for baking, occasionally left a plate of cookies by Sarah's door, sensing her struggles. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter, the grumpy landlord, made it clear that leniency on rent was not an option. But the real void in Sarah's life was Ethan. Memories of him haunted her, especially in the quiet hours of the night. She often found herself thumbing through an old photo album, her fingers lingering on a picture of him in uniform. He had been her anchor, her safe place. Losing him had shattered her world, leaving her to rebuild alone. Still, she carried on, driven by an unwavering love for her son and a flicker of hope that one day life might offer her more than mere survival. Little did she know that hope was about to be tested in ways she could never imagine. The stranger's knock at her door would bring with it not just answers, but a wave of emotions that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and the resilience of the human spirit. It was a quiet Thursday evening when it happened. The rain pattered softly against the windows, and Sarah, exhausted from another double shift, decided to clean out the storage closet, a task she'd been putting off for months. The closet was a chaotic mess of forgotten boxes and dusty bags, each filled with remnants of a life that felt distant. As she reached for a pile of old clothes, her hand brushed against something solid and unfamiliar. Puzzled, Sarah shifted the clutter aside to reveal an old, battered trunk she'd never seen before. Its surface was scratched and weathered, the metal hinges tinged with rust. The air around it smelled faintly of mildew and memories. "Where did this come from?" she murmured to herself, running her fingers over the intricate carvings on its lid. Ben peeked into the room, curious about the commotion. "What's that, Mom?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice trailing off. "I've never seen it before." Ben's eyes sparkled with intrigue. "Maybe it's treasure." Sarah chuckled, though her curiosity mirrored her son's excitement. Fetching a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, she carefully pried open the stubborn latch. The trunk creaked as the lid lifted, revealing its contents. Inside was a collection of items that seemed strangely personal. A neatly folded military jacket, an old watch, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded red ribbon. At the very top was a photograph, yellowed with age, of a young man in uniform. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The man in the photograph was Ethan. Her hands trembled as she picked up the picture, her mind racing. How had this trunk ended up in her closet? And why was it filled with Ethan's belongings? She had been told he died in the war. His body never recovered. Yet here was undeniable proof of his existence, proof that he might have been closer than she ever imagined. She unfolded one of the letters, her eyes scanning the faded handwriting. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I found a way back to you." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She read on, the letter unraveling a story she could hardly comprehend. Ethan's words spoke of love, of promises to return, and of a secret he had kept for years. The final lines sent a shiver down her spine. "I had no choice but to leave, but I swear to you, Sarah, I'll come back. When the time is right, you'll know where to find me." "Mom?" Ben's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Sarah quickly wiped her tears, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. It's just, this is someone very special to me." The boy tilted his head, examining the photograph. "Is that my dad?" Sarah hesitated. Ben had grown up without a father, and she'd always been careful about how much she revealed. "Yes," she said finally, her voice soft. "That's your dad." Ben's eyes widened. "Is he coming back?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her heart aching with uncertainty. That night, as Ben slept peacefully in his room, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the contents of the trunk. Each item was a piece of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. The letters hinted at a man torn between duty and love, a man who had seemingly vanished from her life yet left behind breadcrumbs leading to something greater. The military jacket had a patch sewn onto it with the name of a town, Brookhaven. She couldn't recall Ethan ever mentioning it, but the letters made it clear that it was significant. As the rain intensified outside, Sarah stared at the address scribbled on the back of one of the photographs. It wasn't far, a 2-hour drive at most. The idea of venturing there filled her with a mix of hope and dread. What if Ethan was alive? What if he wasn't? By the time the storm subsided, Sarah had made up her mind. She couldn't live with the unanswered questions any longer. Grabbing her coat and the photograph, she slipped the letters back into the trunk, determined to follow the trail Ethan had left behind. As she started her car and headed toward Brookhaven, her heart raced with anticipation. The road ahead was dark and unfamiliar, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope lighting her way. What she didn't know was that this journey would unravel secrets that would change everything she thought she knew about Ethan and about herself. The next morning, Sarah packed a small bag, tucking the photograph and letters safely inside. Ben watched her with wide, curious eyes as she kissed his forehead before leaving him with a neighbor. "I'll be back soon," she promised, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. The address led her to Brookhaven, a small, sleepy town surrounded by dense woods. The streets were lined with quaint houses, their gardens overgrown with wildflowers. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. The address on the photograph matched a weathered cottage at the end of a gravel road. It stood apart from the other homes, its shutters hanging loosely and ivy creeping up its walls. Sarah parked her car and stepped out, clutching the photograph tightly. As she approached the door, a sense of unease washed over her. The air felt thick, and the faint creak of the trees in the wind only heightened her nerves. She knocked once, the sound echoing in the stillness. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time, and after a long pause, the door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway, his face shadowed by the dim interior. He was older, with streaks of gray in his hair and lines etched deeply into his face. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gravelly. Sarah held up the photograph, her heart pounding. "I'm looking for this man. His name is Ethan." The man's eyes flickered to the photograph, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw recognition flash across his face. But he said nothing. "Please," she pressed. "I need to know if he's alive." The man hesitated before stepping aside. "Come in." The cottage's interior was dim and cluttered, the air thick with the smell of old wood and dust. The man gestured for her to sit while he retrieved a box from a cabinet. He placed it on the table, his hands trembling slightly. "Who are you to Ethan?" he asked, his tone cautious. Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm someone who loved him once," she said finally. The man nodded slowly, opening the box. Inside were photographs, letters, and a small notebook. He handed the notebook to Sarah. "This is Ethan's journal," he said. "He left it with me years ago, said someone might come looking for him one day." Sarah opened the journal, her eyes scanning the handwritten pages. Ethan's words leaped off the paper, recounting his life after the war. He wrote about the guilt he carried, the nightmares that haunted him, and the decision he made to disappear for Sarah's sake. "I thought I was protecting her," one entry read. "But every day, I wonder if I made the biggest mistake of my life." Tears blurred her vision as she read on, each word a window into the pain Ethan had endured. "Where is he now?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man shook his head. "He moved on a few years ago, said he needed to find peace, but he left this for whoever came looking." He handed her a sealed envelope. Sarah stared at it, her fingers trembling as she tore it open. The letter inside was short but powerful. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay hidden forever. I'm sorry for everything, for leaving, for the pain I caused. If you still want answers, you'll find me where it all began. Ethan." Sarah's mind raced. Where it all began. Did he mean their hometown, or somewhere else entirely? "Do you know what he meant by this?" she asked the man, but he shook his head. Only Ethan could answer that. Leaving the cottage, Sarah felt a mix of hope and frustration. Ethan had left her breadcrumbs, but the path was far from clear. She spent the night in a small motel, poring over the journal and letters, searching for clues. One entry caught her attention. "The lake always brought me peace, even in the worst of times. It was our haven, our escape. The lake." Memories flooded back, of summer afternoons spent by the water, of whispered promises under the stars. Could he be there? The next morning, Sarah drove to the lake, her heart pounding with every mile. The sun glinted off the water as she arrived, the scene eerily unchanged from her memories. She walked along the shore, calling out Ethan's name, her voice breaking with desperation. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the edge of the trees, a figure emerged. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was him. Ethan. Older, weathered, but unmistakably Ethan. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the years melted away. Sarah took a step forward, tears streaming down her face. "You came back," she whispered. Ethan's voice trembled as he replied, "I never really left." As Sarah stood frozen on the shore of the lake, Ethan's figure grew closer, his steps hesitant but purposeful. The sound of the waves lapping against the shore mirrored the tumultuous storm of emotions in Sarah's heart. Every question, every moment of doubt, every sleepless night led to this singular moment. When they finally stood mere feet apart, she searched his face, desperate for answers. Ethan looked older, the lines on his face a testament to the years of hardship and guilt he had endured. But his eyes, those deep, familiar eyes, still held the warmth she remembered. "I thought you were dead," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan's shoulders sagged, the weight of his choices evident in his posture. "I thought it was better if you believed that." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Why? Why would you do that to me? To us?" Ethan lowered his gaze, his voice trembling as he began to speak. "After the war, I wasn't the same. I came back, but I wasn't whole. I saw things, did things, that I couldn't live with. I didn't want to burden you with the broken man I'd become." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "You were my world, Ethan. I would have stood by you no matter what." He looked up, his expression filled with pain. "I know that now, but back then, I was drowning in guilt and shame. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you." The revelation hit Sarah like a wave, a mix of anger and heartbreak surging within her. "You left me to grieve for a man who wasn't even dead. Do you know what that did to me?" Ethan nodded, his own eyes brimming with tears. "Not a day went by that I didn't regret it. I tried to stay away, but I couldn't. I needed to see you, to know if you were okay." Sarah stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. The strange man she'd seen at the grocery store a year ago, the feeling of being watched, it had all been Ethan. "You were here all along," she whispered, the realization sinking in. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Ethan hesitated, his hands clenching at his sides. "I thought it was too late, that you'd moved on and built a life without me." Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea how hard it's been to move on? I've spent years trying to understand why you were taken from me, only to find out you left by choice." Ethan stepped closer, his voice pleading. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Sarah. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right. If you'll let me." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Sarah's mind raced, torn between the anger she felt for the years they'd lost and the undeniable love that still lingered between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You broke me, Ethan, but seeing you here, alive, it's like I can finally breathe again." Ethan reached out, his hand hovering just above hers. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you let me." Sarah hesitated before taking his hand, the warmth of his touch reigniting a spark she thought had long been extinguished. "We've both been through hell, Ethan. If we're going to do this, we have to face it together." Ethan nodded, his grip firm and resolute. "Together," he promised. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in hues of gold and crimson, Sarah and Ethan stood united, ready to confront the past and build a future neither thought was possible. The lake, once a symbol of their lost love, now bore witness to a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness and the unbreakable bond of two hearts that refused to give up on each other. The days following their reunion were anything but easy for Sarah and Ethan. Their love, once the foundation of their lives, now stood amidst the wreckage of years spent apart. But they both knew they couldn't move forward without addressing the wounds of the past. Ethan stayed in town, renting a small cabin near Sarah's home. He insisted on earning back her trust, one small act at a time. From repairing the fence in her backyard to helping her son, Michael, with his homework, Ethan wove himself back into Sarah's life, proving that his intentions were genuine. Michael, curious about this stranger who seemed to know so much about his mother, eventually warmed up to Ethan. The bond they formed became a source of healing for both Sarah and Ethan. Watching the two laugh and share stories reminded Sarah of the life they could have had, but it also gave her hope for the future. One crisp autumn evening, as leaves fell in golden swirls around them, Sarah and Ethan took a walk by the same lake where they had reunited. The water, calm and reflective, seemed to mirror the changes in their lives. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "It's not going to be easy, but I want to try. Not just for Michael, but for us." Ethan's eyes glistened with emotion. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of this second chance." From that day forward, they began rebuilding their relationship, one step at a time. Sarah opened her heart, allowing Ethan to see the pain and strength that had shaped her in his absence. Ethan, in turn, shared his struggles, the guilt that had consumed him, and the journey that had brought him back to her. Months turned into years, and together they built a life filled with love, understanding, and forgiveness. Sarah pursued her dream of opening a small art studio, a space where she could teach children and adults alike to find solace in creativity. Ethan, using his experience as a carpenter, helped renovate the studio and made it a place the community cherished. The story of their reunion spread through the town, becoming a symbol of hope and redemption. People found inspiration in their journey, a reminder that it's never too late to mend what's broken. As the years passed, Sarah often found herself reflecting on that fateful day by the lake. What started as a moment of shock and pain had blossomed into a new chapter filled with possibility. The takeaway from their story was clear. Life's most profound challenges often lead to its most meaningful transformations. Love, even when fractured, has the power to heal, if only we have the courage to let it. And as Sarah and Ethan watched Michael graduate years later, surrounded by the family they had rebuilt, they knew one thing for certain. Their love had weathered the storm, emerging stronger than ever. And so, what began as a moment of heartbreak transformed into a story of love, rediscovered, wounds healed, and lives rebuilt. Sarah and Ethan's journey reminds us that even in the face of time, distance, and pain, love has a way of finding its way back. Their reunion wasn't just a second chance at a relationship. It was a second chance at life. A reminder that forgiveness and courage can turn even the darkest chapters into tales of hope and redemption. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where love or forgiveness changed everything? Let us know. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming, inspiring tales. Next time, we'll bring you a story about an ordinary woman who discovered an extraordinary secret in her attic, a secret that would change her family's history forever. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and remember, every story has the power to touch a heart, spark a change, and remind us of what truly matters. Stay tuned.